Alright, it is trying to snow outside again, so instead of trying to force things in the garden and be happy about it, I figured I'd pick up where we left off last week, transfer the measurements that we did of the pond garden in the back onto the iPad and make a scaled drawing so we can start planning things. So I'm using my trusty iPad and I'm using the application called Concepts. So I'm going to open up a new drawing. So first things first, we're going to scale our drawing. So I'm going to hit the settings in the top right, go down, and I'm going to choose 1 to 100. So now if we try and measure out a line, each of these boxes should be 1 meter by 1 meter, which you can double check just by scaling in, which it is. And then if we zoom in a little bit more, each of these smaller boxes will be 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters. The reason I do this is because I like to know how much space I'm putting in between plants, mature plants, when I do the planting plan. Next, we need to draw out our anchor line that we used to do all the measurements outside. When I did the anchor line, it was, I think, about 25 meters, but I only took measurements up to 23 meters, mainly because by the end of it, I was already in an established garden bed that also needs to be redone, so I stopped at 23. So we're gonna draw our line, and I'm using a gray pen to start because I want to build layers on top of each other. I don't want to constantly be drawing on the same layer, and I don't want to be using black pen on black pen because it gets very confusing to read after a while. So I want lots of layers, and I want to use different colored pens because I'm using an iPad, so why not? So that's our 0. So 0 meters and 23 meters. So that's our anchor line. And now all we have to do is basically, as you can see, start at mark 0, go up and make tick marks for each measurement we made and note, and then basically go left to right along the line, the anchor line, and just add tick marks to the iPad drawing. The first one's straightforward. It's just the turf edge at 9.5 meters. And then we move on to the next one. So we do our 1 meter line. We've got the pond starting at 1.1 meters. So there's 1.1 and 3.5. Garden edge at 4.5. I'm just gonna write GE for short to keep it nice and simple. And then the turf edge at 12 meters. And that's pretty much it. I'm just gonna work through and do each of the tick marks and basically recreate what I drew on paper on the iPad. And as I'm going along here, I'm just tagging a few different plants that I noted on the plan. I'm just using an X to denote that, and then writing a shorthand of the Latin name. Okay, all done. You can see it makes a little bit more sense than the original master plan here that I drew down, which was a little all over the map. But now all we have to do is essentially connect the hash marks for things that are the same and draw a better master plan that makes more sense and is easy to visualize. So all I'm going to do is just roughly connect all the things together. I'm not going to worry about it making perfect sense. So there's the pond, something like that. Again, doesn't have to be perfect. We'll choose a brown for the bridge. I'm going to do purple for the existing plants that were identified, so just remaking the X's. I'm going to use orange for the garden edge. And again, the idea isn't to be completely accurate. If you needed more accuracy, when we measured, we wouldn't use 1 by 1 meters. We would use something a little more detailed than that, a little smaller than that. But for my purposes, the only thing that isn't going to really change is the pond. The garden bed sizes are going to change. The property line isn't, but otherwise everything is fair game to be moved around. I'm going to use yellow for the turf edge, which is also the property line. And I'm going to use a super dark gray to make the shed in the backyard. Okay, and that's that. So now, again, the reason I do the layers is I can turn stuff off and on as I need to. So if I want to remove all the hash marks and whatnot and just see the layout of the backyard, this is how I do it. Forgot something, of course. I need to make a scale bar so I don't forget if I export something for somebody else to look at. And I also need to put a north arrow. So we'll make another layer, just call it scale, and we'll just do a quick 1 by 1 meter scale bar, and I'll do the north arrow, which looks something like this. So now the base plan is done, and we have a better idea of the shape of the garden in a scaled drawing. Now what we can just do briefly is think about where the sun is going to be, where the viewpoints are from the house. Not really come up with any ideas at this point, just look at the flow of the piece of property and how I'm going to move around in it and use it. So for our purposes, we're worried about where the sun is going to be, which means, rise in the east, set in the west. I'm going to draw in northeast and northwest for the wintertime too, just why not? So I'm just going to do a half circle like this, And that just gives you an idea, a reminder of where the sun is going to be largely. But for our purposes, it's mostly going to be east-west that we're worried about. Next, we're worried about viewpoints. This is the main view that I'm worried about, looking from the kitchen table. So what does that mean for us? Whoever designed this garden did a good job at the first instance because they were taking into account where people were sitting and looking out from the kitchen table. So that's our main viewpoint. And the secondary viewpoint is looking out kind of like this. Maybe not that far, but somewhere in there. The last thing to think about at this point is movement. I don't go to the shed very often, but you know, it's a shed. That's where my garden stuff is. So I move back and forth between that. And the bridge is mostly cosmetic, but it's a nice little shortcut if you're trying to get to the woods from the house. So we've got movement this way, and we have movement this way. And the most used probably is going from the driveway to the deck, which is along our anchor line to start with. This way, something like that. And that's pretty much where I'm gonna leave it for now. Gonna set it down. Once the weather gets nice outside, I'm going to get back out and continue to clean up the garden beds and rake up the leaves that I didn't have a chance to remove in the winter, and just let the back of my mind start to think about how I want to use the space and yeah, what I want to look at through those two viewpoints. So yeah.